right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Difficult Conversations by Supply the Why. Tonight, we got an outstanding guest for you tonight. We have coach and professional lacrosse player, Marty Bose. He is going to talk to us about leadership. He's going to talk to us a little bit about diversity, his views on diversifying his game, and he's going to talk a little bit about mentorship and what that means to him. So without further ado, let me go ahead and bring Marty up on the screen. A lot lately. Marty, what's happening?
Hey, what's going on, Dean? Thanks so much for having me.
The honor's all mine. I'm excited to let people in on some of the conversations that you and I have been having about a variety of subjects, meaning from coaching to mentorship to even playing. Like, what's it going to take for you to continue your fan? So, tell us a little bit about yourself. What have you been doing, and what your plans are?
Sure. Yeah, I coach as my main occupation. I've been playing for 8 seasons, took the last season and a half off of playing and really focused on coaching. And it's been interesting, of course, since everything has occurred, really focused on online mentorship and shifting my business model from in-person. I still offer some in-person training to a lot of online mentorship, and it's allowed me to actually go deeper with many of my clients. So I don't quite have as big of a volume of clientele per se, but I've gotten some really, really great work with the clients that have stuck it out. And also got a great opportunity to coach at St. Michael's College up here in Burlington, Vermont. And just blessed, man. Just so lucky to be able to keep coaching and doing what I love. So,
Marty, can I just circle back? When you say go deeper with your clients, what does that mean?
Well, it's a good question. I think what I really mean is I get to know them better. I instill things like discipline and accountability. You know, if I see a client once a week in person and we do training together, whether it's individual or small group, we're going to have fun. We're going to get better. We're going to get after it, when we're there together. But then what? What happens when they go home, and how productive is their practice on their own? Where now with this mentorship program, it allows me to facilitate some of that at-home work with a little bit more of a finely, tuned comb. And it's been this opening up of personalities, where I get to see them in this different environment. They see me in this different environment. So depth in that, I feel like I really get to know them on a deeper level.
All right. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing, like where you're from. What were you into as a teen and a youth?
Sure. So grew up in Quincy, just south of Boston, and just obsessed with sports. Couldn't get enough. All different types of sports: skateboarding, baseball, basketball was my first love. Picked up lacrosse stick in 6th grade. Love volleyball, just love playing sports. And I've always just kind of been that jock guy, always trying to, win races, even when it's with my family, and playing cards isn't fun with me and stuff like that. But I grew up in Quincy, and yeah, not a big lacrosse city by any means. And luckily had some good mentors in that stage of my life that planted the seed to play at the college level. So I definitely thought about that from a young age, but just grew up in the city, just hanging out with my friends. Recruiting wasn't a big thing then. Club wasn't a big thing then. And so I just really, I had a great childhood experience. Huge shout out to my parents. Amazing environment that they created for me to believe in myself and support me, both mentally and financially. And so really, really blessed to have the upbringing that I did.
That's outstanding. So you went from Quincy and you ended up at the University of Hartford, where you had an unbelievable college career, right?
It was good.
I'll brag for you. I know you don't want to brag. I'll brag for you.
No Hall of Famer, but I was able to get better every year, for sure.
And then that led to you becoming a professional lacrosse player, a pro athlete. So what was that transition like? And like from a mentality standpoint, from a preparation standpoint, what was that process like?
Humbling. I didn't even sniff the field, man, when I first got there. I got drafted by the Boston Cannons when they had Paul Rabel, Ryan Boyle, Kyle Sweeney, Mitch Belial, all these legends. but I got access to them, and I was able to practice with them and play in that environment. And it took me about a year and a half to actually get some playing time. And, just to speak to your question about the training, couldn't be more different than at the college level, right? You're told what to do up until that point. Show up at the weight room here. This is what you're doing for your workout today. Show up at practice at this time. Go to your study hall hours. Everything's sort of laid out for you. When you get to the pros, you're on your own, and you show up on a Friday for a practice. You either ball out or you don't, and it really is cutthroat in that, if you have a big name tied to your game, maybe there's a little more leeway. But for the most part, you string together 1 or 2 bad days in a row, see you later. You're not coming back. Or at least you're getting replaced for a week, and maybe you'll get another chance in a couple weeks. But, you need to really put up. And the training process is completely individual. You Monday through Thursday, you're on your own, and Friday through Sunday, you're with the team. So it's day and night different than the college level.
And that sounds crazy to me. I mean, you almost have like an old school NFL type experience. And what I mean by that is in the old school NFL players, and probably even some of the NBA players, had to work jobs in addition to being a professional football or basketball player. So what is that like, trying to work during the week and find out that's going to be flexible, let you travel?
Old school NFL, they didn't do it for the money, right?
Right.
We do it because we love it, right? It's so much fun, but that's the reality. It's not a full-time job. It's a part-time job. A lot of guys coach, because when you coach, you naturally already have the stick in your hand. And a lot of times, like myself, running a coaching business, I can take as many clients or not take as many clients as I so choose on a week-to-week basis, which allows me to train like a professional, spend 2 to 3 hours a day preparing my body and mind for that elite level. So, and it's something that is taken a lot more seriously, especially in the last couple of years with the evolution of the PLL. Guys that play both NLL and PLL, now it's looking like more of an all year round professional athlete job. But even then, you still need some sort of other supplemental income. So it's a grind, right? But like, man, what a lucky grind to be a part of.
That's amazing. And then you have a third thing that you do. You're the CEO of your own company, right? You own a business on top of all this. So tell us about the name of that business is it's Compete, right?
That's right.
All right. So tell us about Compete and how that started.
So Compete Lacrosse Academy, that's the LLC I run my business out of. Huge shout out to my business partner, Joe Drain. So that is my own separate LLC. However, he started a business called Compete Strength and Conditioning, and he's been an incredible mentor to me. He's my strength and conditioning coach, one of my great friends, and really helped me mentally, over the years to help me become more productive and have better habits and things like that. But the business started as going to people's backyards, renting some field space at a local field, and seeing if I could get 20 kids to show up just to cover the bill. And that's all it really was. Just, hey, let's see if we have something here. And again, huge shout out to Joe. We were able to start a brick and mortar business in Norwood that allowed me to have my own space. That's really a game changer for a skill development coach to not, I had fees for the space, but I owned it, right? I own it. And so that money that gets put back into the business it doesn't feel like as much of a rent, it feels like more of a mortgage, right? Where I'm kind of feeding into the business with it. So really, really lucky to have that opportunity, but it's just been, like I said, it's been going deep with clients, like really taking them in and for the longest time, not saying no to anyone. I take kindergartners, first timers, I take pros and everything in between. So it's given me this unique perspective to work with such a wide variety of athlete, personality types, but also ages and genders and race. It's been a really, really cool opportunity.
So that brings me to a video that I want to show, because I try to do this at least once a show. I try to show a video that kind of ties in everything we want to talk about. We'll take a look at the video, then afterwards we'll transition to some of the deeper topics that we talked about before we brought you on. So everybody stand by for this video. I think people are going to know this one.
All right, man, listen. I'm Gary. You're Julius. Let's get some particulars and just get this over with, all right?
Particulars?
Yeah.
No matter what I tell you, you ain't gonna never know nothing about
Hey,
me.
listen. I ain't running any more of these 3 days, okay?
Well, what I got to say you really don't want to hear, because honesty ain't too high up on your people priority list, right?
Honesty? You want honesty? All right, honestly, I think you're nothing. Nothing but a pure waste of God-given talent. You don't listen to nobody, man. Not even Doc or Boone. Shiver push on the line every time, man. You blow right past them. Push them, pull them, do something. You can't run over everybody in this league. And every time you do, you leave one of your teammates hanging out to dry. Me in particular.
Why should I give a hoot about you? Huh? Or anybody else out there? You want to talk about a waste? You the captain, right?
Right.
Captain's supposed to be the leader, right?
Right.
You got a job?
I have a
you
job.
been doing your job?
I've been doing my job.
Then why don't you tell your white buddies to block for Rev better? Because they have not blocked for him worth a plug nickel, and you know it. Nobody plays, yourself included. I'm supposed to wear myself out for the team? What team? No. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look out for myself, and I'm going to get mine.
See, man, that's the worst attitude I ever heard.
Attitude reflect leadership, Captain.
I love that clip. I never get tired of that. So, attitude reflects leadership, Captain. So, tell me about that clip. How does that make you feel? And how does that go with your brand as far as what you're trying to instill with some of your younger athletes?
Yeah, I'll try to answer that as best I can. I mean, definitely gives me some butterflies. That tension, it's so real, so raw. You can see that's it's a real emotion that each of them are having, and I think it's very authentic. As far as how it's tied to my brand, I don't know exactly how it's tied to my brand, but I'll tell you the honesty part, on the captain's part, I appreciate his honesty and how he's speaking how he really feels. And one of my favorite moments is when his face changes as he tells him, why aren't your white friends blocking for Rev on this certain, package? And you can see his face change. And those are the moments that reminds me of, maybe it's not race related particularly, but it reminds me of a moment when a kid has an aha moment, and it's like, oh, and you think about it a different way. And that's something that I really try to facilitate at least once a session with my clients, right? We should have at least one aha moment that you say, okay, let me think about this a different way now, because you've shed some light on something. So, I mean, I love that. It fires me up. For some reason, I want to run through a brick wall. I'm going to do some push-ups or something, man.
So you and I, we've talked a lot about accountability in the last 2 days, and I know that's something that's huge with you. And that was actually when I first came across this clip, when I was researching what would work best with your brand, the accountability piece jumped right off the page at me, because that is something that I think you're really onto something by focusing on accountability and just finding different ways to make your younger athletes understand the importance of accountability and then how to apply it, but apply it without beating yourself down at the same time. It's a funny line that you got to try to navigate there. Yeah. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, no, for sure. Where my mind goes is I've been really lucky as of late to go deeper into what accountability means to me because of training in the martial arts. And that's something that my sensei preaches is accountability can be sliced and diced. Who are you really accountable to, right? And ultimately, it's ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so when we hold ourselves accountable our values, and to what we prioritize, we have a different way of communicating with other people. The things you say to your colleagues or, your players or your students, it has a different effect when they can feel that you are accountable to yourself. When you really mean, if I tell a kid to get up at 5 a.m. and get a lift in before the 6 a.m. practice, it means something different if I've been doing it every day, right? And so that concept of being accountable to ourselves it takes a lot of maturity, it really does, because it's not easy to do. And like you said, it's very easy to go into a state of self-deprecation and start to judge ourselves if we don't do what we told ourselves we were going to do. And so, I certainly battle with that. But it's something that is a focus for myself and definitely something I'm trying to impart.
And I love that because, and again, folks, if you're listening, I'm here with Marty Bose. He's a pro lacrosse player. He's a coach, but this isn't something that's exclusive to sports. This is something that applies to the business world. This is something that applies to any law enforcement. It applies to any different, job title that you might have out there, anything you do. So, it's just something you should think about, the self-accountability and the importance of that with being successful in whatever it is you do. Also in that video, you touched upon it, there's race relations. All right. It talks about, the integration of a football team. You are involved in a sport that is not a super diverse sport. And I know that you are passionate about increasing the diversity in that sport. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, just like something struck a chord with me last summer after the murder of George Floyd, and it really turned the page in that, I realized that I am not doing everything that I could be doing for this issue. This is something that I've heard my black and white counterparts bring up in different contexts, but I've never stepped in and had a solid opinion. I've sort of just let things develop, and that sort of changed last summer. But, as far as things that are happening right now, what I'm really trying to do is echo the voices of my black colleagues, a lot of the players that are in particular, the Black Lacrosse Alliance, that are, all the professional lacrosse, mostly in the PLL, black players in that alliance that are pushing for change and sending messages out into the world. I'd like to try to echo those messages and support those messages as best I can, and learn. I don't have answers. I have my own experiences, and I've grown up in America white, and so that experience has put me into this category that, I've been so privileged to not only have, this incredible upbringing, these parents that love me so much and provided all these resources for me to fulfill my dreams and step into these different environments prepared, but also, feeling like I need to empathize with what my black and brown counterparts, my colleagues, are talking about, and not just hear it and say, I agree with you, but hear it and try to understand where they're coming from. Not be like, oh, I get it. I get what it's like to be you, but try to empathize with where they're coming from so that hopefully I can help, again, promote their messages and stir some change in some people that might be on the fence about what they really believe. It's an interesting dynamic. This whole country is, ready for an argument, right? And they got their stake in the ground over here, and if someone over here says something, they're coming. It's a battle, and so my hope is to, through compassion, through empathizing and loving someone who disagrees with me, hopefully we can find some common ground.
I love it. And one of the things we talk about here on Supply the Why quite a bit is we must seek to understand. So without seeking to understand the point of view and the experiences of other people, it is impossible to even reach middle ground, let alone try to convince somebody one way or the other. If you can't meet in the middle, I mean, you can forget about trying to get people to see your point of view. So I think you're onto something there, and I think by just even mentioning that there's the existence of maybe things are different for you than they were for me because you're white. I mean, I grew up in a suburb, so I grew up around white people, but I can tell you right now, like it was very obvious to me that I was not white, and there were differences, even at a very young age. There were clear cut differences, and though 90+% of my upbringing and my experiences were great, I still had to endure some things at a young age that a lot of young my young white friends didn't have to, and they probably couldn't have even really got their head around it if they felt some of the things that I did. So I'm going to hit the chat real quick. So Heidi's got a question. How do we introduce the sport of lacrosse to those communities that may not have the resources? All right, cost a little money to play lacrosse. Yeah,
need resources. Super good opportunity to plug my really good friend and colleague Kevin Barney, who he's a director of the MBYLL, but he's on a mission right now to raise, I believe, upwards of $300,000 for this particular cause, and to help provide equipment, provide sticks, provide coaching for underprivileged communities that wouldn't have the opportunity otherwise, and give them free tuition to the MBYLL so that they can take part. Stuff like that. That's how we got to do this. Is we have to attack fundraising as something that we have to take upon ourselves. And there's groups that are trying to do this as well. But I really truly believe if an individual takes it upon themselves, I think a lot can be done, because they can rally behind that person, and people can sort of buy in and chip in as needed. But stuff like that, that's how we do it, and spreading the awareness. And social media changes everything, right? Like, who knows who's watching this right now that I never would have, been able to be in front of otherwise. But just promoting messages isn't enough, right? We have to actually provide resources. And so, easier said than done, but supporting people like my good friend Kevin Barney is one way.
All right, and something, I'm going to piggyback that question. I'm going to say that is for disadvantaged minorities, but I'm also going to speak for the middle class and middle income minorities, because there's quite a few of us out there. So I don't think a lot of people realize that lacrosse, A, is a sport, they don't know much about it, and B, they don't realize that lacrosse is as welcoming as it is, because that's how. So I'm going to take a step back and talk about how you and I met. So you and I met when my son plays lacrosse, and it was fairly obvious a couple of years ago that it was more than just something he just kind of liked to do. He seemed to really like it and have a little bit of an affinity towards the sport. So because of that, my wife and I had a discussion, and we decided to seek out additional coaching for him, beyond, his club team. And that's how you and I met. So we come in to compete one Saturday morning, and, I bring in, my wife, my son and I, and we sit down and we're talking to you, and you're giving this fantastic presentation about all the benefits of compete and your point of views and how you want to, build the mentality of young players. And I didn't think for a second that color mattered to you. I didn't think for a second that my son wasn't going to be welcome. So I mean, you had me. I mean, you and I, we joke about it all the time. You talked about something. Yep. So Heidi put it in the chat. She said, you talked about the flow state. And when you talked about the flow state, you had me right then and there. That whole thing about being in the zone and coaching kids through it and teaching people how to harness it. But the point I'm trying to make is people need to know how welcoming the sport is, right? I mean, this isn't something that is exclusive. I mean, my son has never once had a problem.
Yeah, it's a controversial topic, because what happens is if you start to listen to the stories of some of the professional players, some of the black professional players, you'll get a different story. How welcoming is lacrosse, right? You come into my office, I'm gonna say I'm over here on one side of the spectrum, right? I grew up in a city. I had plenty of black and brown friends growing up. There's a certain welcoming. I'm able to create an environment that I don't think is true across the board of lacrosse, and that's the reality. There's a number of instances, hundreds, maybe even thousands, where there's one black kid on an all-white team, and at some point they just stop showing up. Why? Was it maybe something vulgar that was terribly said? Probably not. But it's those little things that when you grow up in an all-white community with maybe one or two or three, a small amount of minorities that are on your team organization, there's not a concerted effort to really try to understand where they're coming from. And so now that there's this, at least a national conversation at play, now these programs are starting to be like, well, how welcoming are we really? And how do we be more welcoming? And there's a lot of I don't knows, right? I certainly don't have the answer to that. I would like to think that we're going to make it better as these years go on. But it's a sad truth. There's some players I idolize, these guys. I idolize these guys. And I've heard them saying on social media, I don't know if I really want my son to play lacrosse. How can you argue with that, right? I mean, that's the sport that they love, that they've dedicated their life to, and they're questioning whether it's really as welcoming as they would like it to be. So I think it's a good conversation to have because I do think you seem to think it's pretty welcoming, which it's awesome that your experience has been that so far. But my concern is that as he gets to high school and ideally maybe college, what happens then? Is it as welcoming then? So we'll see. But it's something that I do think a lot about.
I mean, these are great points. This is such an important discussion because there's a couple things at play here. Because first of all, maybe I'm comparing my son's experience to my experience when though I didn't play lacrosse, when I was playing youth sports, and when you just said the one black kid on the team, hello, that was me. That was me. I mean, I could show you pictures. I probably should have had one on deck where I was the only black kid on just about all of my sports teams up until junior high. Just the way it was. And for the most part, like I said, I had good coaches. I had caring coaches. I had my very first basketball coach, Mr. Wager. I'm gonna mention him by name, and he used to have a thing, and he used to pull me, put his arm around me before a game, and he'd point to the backboards. He said, "You see that up there?" And he pointed to the backboards and says, "They have your name written all over it. I want you to, every ball that comes off, I want you to get it." And he just got me excited and made me feel like welcome and that kind of, and you're right. Like, I'm hoping the positive experience my son's had with you and had with, a couple of his other coaches, it springboards him into just being like, what, I do belong here. And I love being here. And that's the way he feels right now. But to your point, it couldn't possibly be that way everywhere. I'd be naive to think that everybody's having that same experience.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting to talk about too on the subject is, so like you grew up in the suburbs and you were, around mostly white people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know a couple of colleagues that were in lower income, not around mostly white people growing up until they got to high school and college. And then they started to be around more white people. And one in particular, I'm not going to name his name. He's playing college lacrosse, and his coach, him and his coach got into a little argument, whatever it was. And his coach said to him, "I don't know how to talk to you people." Something like that, right? I don't know if he said you people. He said, "I don't know how to talk to guys like you," or "I don't know how to talk to black people," is what he was getting at. And that's, hold up, whoa, right? Right then and there. But at the same time, it's like, it opens up this different conversation of, if you've only worked with white suburban people, you can't take that same approach with someone who grew up in lower income, right? And I think this is actually a decent segue into some of the police work that we could talk about. But that's one of the things I've been really fascinated by, where, like, if you go into a different section of town, do you expect to talk to someone the exact same way you would talk to your white neighbor, and then get confused why you're getting such a different result? It's an interesting dynamic that I think as coaches we need to be very, very attuned to if we're going to get the most out of our players and make our players feel as comfortable as they can.
Well, let me speak to that, but we're going to hit the chat real quick first. All right. So an old coach of mine has a question. He says, should Lax follow in the footsteps of tennis and make a concentrated effort to get into communities with kids of color and put resources into building sports in their inner cities? There are several Division II schools offering scholarships for Lax, both men and women. And if the sport invested in the grassroots programming, we may see an uptick. What are your thoughts on that? That's from Coach
Yeah.
V. Thank you, Coach V.
Thank you. No, that sounds great. I think, the short answer is yes, right? I mean, this is exactly what we want. And I do believe that there are organizations like Harlem Lacrosse that are doing that work, and as they get more resources, I think that there's more opportunities for situations like that to rise up. I don't know too much about how that tennis progression went.
Yeah, you were young when that.
But tennis is hard, man. Frick, I can't. I'm trying to keep that thing in bounds.
So that is a fair point. And obviously, Venus and Serena are obviously it shows what happens when you can branch out into and bring in other people of color, just other ethnicities into a sport. How great the results can be. Tiger Woods as well with golf. All right. So Bob has a question. What changes would you like to see in the youth or high school game?
Great question. This is something that my first thought here is I believe that one big thing that we're missing as a whole in America with our youth lacrosse is the awareness of the roots of the sport. How did this sport come to be? This is the creator's game. This is the medicine game. What does that mean? How did it come to be called that? That's something that if you ask a youth or high school player anywhere in America, they might not have an answer for you. They don't know. And so, the biggest thing that I would like to see changed is allowing gratitude to be paid, allowing time, whether it be a pregame ritual that starts or some form of, gratefulness tied into, don't just roll the ball out and play. It's like hard-nosed, oh, this is how we play lacrosse in America, blah, blah, blah. We don't know what it was like to get to this point, and so I think having some form of education of the roots of the sport be tied into the experience of a high school, particularly a youth or high school, experience, I think would be really beneficial, and allowing people to understand that it is medicine to be able to play this game. That's why it's called the medicine game, is when someone in a tribe would be sick or down or, off, they would call for a medicine game to allow all the energy from that game would go towards that individual that needed that medicine.
That's amazing.
And it's powerful stuff. And people don't know that. And I didn't know that until I was able to play at the professional level, and you start to meet, the world gets smaller and smaller when you get to the top. And when you meet some of these people that grew up on reservations and grew up in Canada and really understand and embody that that true meaning, it changes the way you think about the sport. It changes the way you think about every step you take, every single breath. It's different. So I'd love to see that worked into it.
Well, so there's the mental part of the game, but how about a specific facet of the game, like a rule change? Would you like to see, for example, more contact, less contact?
Yeah,
that kind of deal.
Yeah, I think maybe contact is great. I
just
think,
an example. That's just an example.
Yeah, what I would like to see is what I do with my youth players to improve skill and improve field awareness is I create a rule, a 3-second rule that you can't have this ball on your stick for more than 3 seconds. One of the hardest things to teach to coach, especially at youth, is off-ball movement. When you have the ball in your stick, someone's trying to get it from you, it's pretty obvious you should move around. You should go somewhere else because this guy's going to get you if you don't. But when you don't have the ball in your stick and your teammates got it, a lot of times people just stand around. I think I'm open, or maybe they're just out to lunch. When there's that 3-second rule installed, I've really found success in getting kids to move off ball and with a sense of urgency that they know their teammate has to get rid of the ball soon. So let me get open now. So I would like to see that. It's like, honestly, I'd love to see that at the younger levels, shorter field games, introduction to box lacrosse. It's faster pace, balls in play more reps on offense and defense, more touches on the ball, less about clearing and riding and systems and things like that. Just let them play, let them get touches on the ball. And then I think when you get to maybe 8th grade or the high school level, you can have more of a structure to the field lacrosse game that we know.
All right. So we're going to switch gears here. We're going to go and get away from the actual game of lacrosse, and we're going to switch roles. So you had told me the other day that there were some questions that you had for me.
Absolutely.
And they're hard questions, and it was a hard question or two, right?
That's right.
All right. So let's go ahead. Let's seek to understand each other again.
Well, just for context, anyone that's maybe watching this from one of my social media channels, so you are a police officer in the city of town of Stoughton, correct?
Yep.
How many years have you been doing that?
So I've been a police officer for 17 years. I've been in law enforcement.
17 years police officers, right? So, what I think about is uncomfortable situations that arise, and I try to put myself and again empathize with my counterparts, right? With whether it's a civilian or a police officer, and so I started thinking about, man, I have access to this awesome guy who's willing to talk to me about whatever and let me coach his son and, willing to hear me out. And so I was like, what is a situation that you may have encountered that is something that might have needed to get checked, right? Someone needed to get told that that's not okay. And so where my mind went is, we've been told, right, especially since last summer, we've been told that there's a lot of bad cops, right? And maybe we should defund the police. And there's been all these conversations of civilians that have opinions, have opinions on how the police should be run and things like that. But without getting too much into that, more on the race side of things, have you been on the job with your white counterpart cops, the good old boys, and has the N-word been said in a scenario that you heard it and had to check someone on that, and how'd that play out? How'd that make you feel? And do you feel like the other side understood where you were coming from? Was there a conclusion?
So as far as the N-word being thrown around in my presence, that's it was pretty rare. So the one time comes to my mind right now where, again, I guess if you're a younger person, you make distinctions between ER and GA or GAH at the end. You know what I mean? They're two different meanings. So this was a GAH moment. And it was mentioned in such a way where it wasn't like, hey, look at that group of GER. It was something along the lines, maybe like a song lyric or something like that. And it was a GA or GAH type deal. And it was in my presence. And I immediately was like, why? Why? You don't hear me say it. You know what I mean? So you're not saying it because you heard me saying it, and now you're like, well, like he says it, and we're cool, and we're good friends. I mean, this is a good friend of mine. This is somebody who I trust my life to, and they said it. This is somebody who had invited me to family events and been around and been there for me when I've been down. This wasn't somebody who was setting me up because they were racist. This was, if they were, I mean, they have the most discipline I've ever seen to have that kind of discipline over the amount of time that we worked together, to wait for that one moment to say, surprise, I'm racist. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't necessarily that, but what it was, you know what? I'm going to coin a new term. I don't know if people say it very often, but there's something, it's not just you're like not racist or racist. There's levels in between there. So that level in between there, I'm going to call it racially insensitive. There are people that are just racially insensitive. They're not racist. They don't actively go out and try to hurt people of different races or disadvantage people. But sometimes they just don't think about the effects of their words and actions against that are towards people of different races. It's not an intentional thing. Like, again, they don't wake up in the morning and say, you know what, today's my day, and I'm gonna make Dean feel like he's less of a person than I am. But just without thinking, they just maybe say something, or maybe a joke that's kind of an off-color joke, and it's kind of like, well, like maybe you should have thought that through. So the time you're talking about was just like it was one of those. It was, you know what I mean. And I just I just asked why, and I think sometimes that you make people feel smaller that way by making them explain themselves. You know what I mean? This is somebody, like, if I wanted to, yes, I could have beat this person up or stuff like that. But I mean, I'm a grown man. This person's a grown man. Like, it wouldn't have accomplished what me just simply forcing this person to explain themselves accomplished.
Got it.
That's my answer to that. And then there was one time when a citizen, this is actually a funny story. So I am in a very bad section of the jurisdiction I worked in at the time, and I see this woman, this white woman. She's pacing back and forth. She's just acting crazy, very erratic. Obviously, she must have wanted my attention, because it's not like she could have missed me. We're in an alley. It's light out. I'm in full uniform. So I go over to this woman. I say, hey, what's going on? What's the problem? And she goes, it's my daughter. I said, really? Tell me about your daughter. What's going on with your daughter? She goes, my daughter's dating this effing N-word, and I don't understand why. This woman looks right at me and chooses me to have that conversation with. So I take a second, and I got to admit, it caught me so off guard that I think I started laughing. And I said to her, I said, what in the hell would make you say that to me? Because I had to hear what her answer was. And then she goes into the whole, well, you're not really, you're a police officer. You know what I mean? I'm like, no, I don't. I have no idea what you mean. Don't ever say anything like that around me again. Beat feet. And that was the end of it.
Wow.
I see her 3 weeks, but it gets better. I see her 3 weeks later, 3 weeks later, same alley, coming out of an establishment, walking arm in arm with a guy who's my complexion, smiling. And I see her, I said, hey, I'm like, you remember me from a few weeks back? And she goes, yeah, I remember you. She goes, I said, weren't you the one that dropped that N-bomb on me? And she was like, yeah. I said, well, what is this? What changed in 3 weeks? You were complaining that your daughter was dating this person of color. I see you walking out with this gentleman arm in arm. She looks at me dead in my face, smiles with her, with the teeth that people that do drugs have. And she says, the darker the berry, the sweeter the juice, baby, and walks off with this guy.
What?
You can't make this stuff up. It's part of why sometimes being a police officer is the best job in the world, because you have these stories where this woman says something so crazy to me here, and then fast forward a few weeks later, she does a complete 180 and she's a different person. So these are the type of things you see when you're a police officer of color, and you see how people view you. How if I had been in that same alley, not in uniform, maybe she would have seen me differently.
Sure.
Maybe it would have been a GER instead of a GA or a GAH in her mind. I don't know, but those are just two different examples of times I've had to check somebody and have a conversation with somebody that maybe might have made them feel a little uncomfortable.
Sure.
And that's I hope that answered your question there.
No, for sure. I mean, I'm intrigued. I'm fascinated. You see some of these videos of people talking that are clearly racist, and I think the part that it's not confusing to me, but the part that irks me the most is how sure of themselves they are, like true delusional behavior. That when you truly believe that you're correct in thinking that you're better than someone because of the way that they look. I mean, it's not humane. It's literally there's a missing link that hopefully through compassion they can come back. I
can give you the missing link if you want.
What's that?
Looking for you right now if you want. That's an easy one. You know what the missing link is?
What's
that?
The
missing link is when they act like that and when they make those statements around people that look like them but don't necessarily agree with them, they're not getting called out by those people. It's one of those things where the silence of those people that they're making these comments around makes them complicit. It's like there's two types of crime, right? There's two types of crimes. There's a crime of commission, which means it's something that you actively do. I walk into a store, I take a Kit Kat, I put it in my pocket, I leave. I walk up to somebody, I stick a knife in their torso, and then I leave. Right? Those are crimes of commission. A crime of omission is when you fail to act and you fail to step up and you fail to do the right and moral thing. So that is what makes those people so bold, because they figure, hey, well, nobody's calling me out on this. There must be something to it. You must agree with me. I sit right in front of you, Marty, and you didn't say anything. So I'm going to assume by your silence that you agree with me.
Right.
So that is the missing link that you're talking about. That's what emboldens these people, and that's what allows them to flow that way, because nobody is challenging them or checking what they're saying.
Wow.
Have you ever heard that before? Do you?
I mean, I think so, and it honestly makes a lot of sense. I think that's something that we've talked about before too. That I would like to be not committing that crime. If something were to happen, and I think that's something that I would really like to impart on the people that I work with and the people that I spend time with. You need to understand that if you are white in America, you have a different experience than someone who is of color. And when a situation arises or you hear someone say something that they shouldn't be saying, it's on you. It's on you to step up and let them know that that's not okay. Right. I mean, it's powerful and it's not easy. It's definitely not easy, but imagine how much harder it is for someone like yourself that hears something like that. Why should you have to be the one that says something when someone who looks like them can?
And therein lies the dilemma, Marty. Sure. That is where the privilege talk comes up. I'm talking like the real privilege stuff, not the whole Dean and Marty are born the same day, same hospital. Marty has 50 G's in his bank account. Dean has 0. Not that kind of privilege. Privilege. I'm going to explain white privilege the way I explain it to people when I talk to groups, when I provide trainings, when I talk to people that I have an emotional, like a relational credit score with. The way I explain it is very simple. White privilege is simply being on the right end of the benefit of the doubt. That's it. That's the simplest way to put it. You and I both walk into a place. You're looked at one way. It's like, oh, he's just a good guy. Or if you're loud and boisterous, like, he's just having a good time, had a few drinks. I came in loud and boisterous. People are like, oh, what's wrong with this guy? You know, like angry black dude. Why is he so loud and demonstrative? That is the privilege piece. It's that you can act one way, I can act what I would perceive as that same way, and it's viewed as two completely different things. And when you're always on the wrong end of that, that is when the privilege comes out.
Wow. It's like literally the best explanation I've heard. You can't, I mean, maybe someone is thinking of an argument for that, but in my opinion, you can't argue that. I've been let off the hook so many times because I look like a nice guy, you know, and I've made plenty of mistakes. But I think I try to be a nice human being. I try to be kind to others, try to be considerate. And so when I get let off the hook, it feels like, oh, well, it's because I'm a nice guy. Mm-hmm. And the more and more I have conversations like this, you realize that maybe it is because you're nice, but it's also because you're not black. Because when there's no fear that you're a threat, it's a lot easier to let you off the hook. But when you don't understand where someone's coming from and you have subconscious fear tied into seeing a large black man, you're going to act differently. You're going to treat them differently. And what's upsetting is people aren't willing to admit that. And I'm hoping that changes.
Well, we all have biases. Like there's nobody, I don't care what color you are, I don't care what your sexual orientation is, I don't care what color your eyes are, any of that stuff. We all have biases and we all have preconceived notions about other human beings. It's a survival mechanism. As a police officer, of course, you have biases and you have preconceived notions about somebody. I'll give you one right now. If I see somebody walking and I see that their arms are swinging abnormally, maybe they have some sort of physical condition, or maybe the reason why one of their arms isn't swinging is because they're pinning a firearm against their hip. But I am going to look at them a little differently than somebody who's walking with a normal gait. That is a safety concern. That is a bias based on safety. If I see two people in a what I would consider a less than traveled area, and they do a handshake in such a way, and it looks like two people are exchanging goods, that looks like a drug deal to me. Maybe they have some funky handshake. Who knows? But those are signs that I'm gonna based on my training experience, my bias is gonna automatically say, you know what? They're meeting in an area where people typically don't meet. The handshake kind of lingered a little bit, and they both kind of did one of these and walked off. That feels like a drug deal to me. And I'm going to probably act accordingly until I can satisfactorily disprove that. So there's all different kinds of biases out there, but people have to admit that they have them. We all have them, and then we can start addressing them and what's behind them. But until that happens, until people start admitting that they even have them, and it's a moot point. It's very difficult to have this discussion.
Agreed. It's interesting how this came full circle, and it really goes back to accountability. Holding yourself accountable, understanding that you do have bias. If you think you don't, you're lying to yourself. What's up, Coach? Hey, DJ, how are you, buddy?
So DJ's on. So it's a good thing we're keeping our language clean because he decided to chime in and check out what we're talking about. So we got a little deep there, and I hope people get something from that. I mean, this is it's difficult conversation for a reason. We're supposed to talk about things. We're supposed to go to areas where it's more than just your normal conversation, so you can see what's behind the curtain, so to speak. So Mike Powell says, I got exhausted just listening to how much you're grinding. Good stuff. Keep pushing your dreams, and welcome to the show.
I appreciate that notion, Michael. I promise you I'm getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night, and I spend plenty of time recovering my body, so I feel great.
Well, that's what happens. You know, my kids would never allow us to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep, but we can dream. We can dream. So maybe in about 12 years when we can kick them out and they can go to college and go live their own lives.
You have mastered the art of the power nap.
So we've gotten deep and we went down the rabbit hole a little bit. Let's bring it back. Let's talk about something positive in the last 5 minutes. what do you got going on now? And what does 2021 look like for Marty Bose and Compete?
Well, I'm really trying to hone in on this mentorship program that I mentioned earlier. Right now, I've got about 15 of 30 slots filled, and what that's allowing me to do is, again, go deep with those clients that I am working with on a week-to-week basis. But once I have a sustained weekly flow with that, I can really put my attention onto other projects that I am passionate about. One or two I'd already mentioned, and another project that I'm super passionate about, which is playing lacrosse. I'd love to come back to playing the sport that I love so much, and luckily I think I'll have a good opportunity later this year.
Well, I can tell you right now, there's a household in Stoughton that is dying to see you get back out there because, man, your intensity, your passion for the sport, your passion for the learning process. I got to be honest, as much as I want to see you play, I just like your passion for the learning process. That's obviously something that's important to Supply the Why. It's important to me personally. And your just desire to seek to understand and your desire to find different ways to change the paradigm of your players and coaches is phenomenal. It's something that I've said it to you before. I'm going to say it in front of everybody that's listening. I wish you were around when I was playing. Like, you were what was missing from me as an athlete. I needed somebody who could break things down in such a way where I could understand accountability and different levels of accountability. And I maybe I wasn't so hard on myself or I didn't get down when people had some negative things or what I perceived to be negative to say about me. So I appreciate what you're doing, Marty. I really do.
Thank you, man. And that's one of my students there, says he's learned a lot. It's what you said about the continuous improvement. I didn't realize that was my brand. It's just, I just kept getting said no to, people kept telling me I wasn't there yet. So I clearly had to change something. And so it was embedded into my daily and weekly and monthly and yearly approach to find something to get better at, strengthen a strength, strengthen a weakness, get smarter. And what's been really, really profoundly helpful, to bring it back to the martial art reference, is this concept of appreciating the plateau. When you keep getting better, it's not like this, right? It's you get better and then you plateau for a while. And what happens during that plateau is you keep practicing. You keep practicing. And if you don't continue practicing, you're going to stay at that level. But if you keep practicing, even though you're not getting better, you keep practicing anyways, here comes that next jump, right? And so when you learn to appreciate the plateau, for any of my athletes that are listening out there, don't train for the sake of getting better. Like, if you, at the end of your session, if you're like, I need to get better at the end of this session, you got the wrong mentality. You have to practice because it's the right thing to do, because you're disciplining yourself and you're holding yourself accountable. The improvement will come. Appreciate the plateau.
Oh my God! Why do I have to be 45 years old? I'm telling you, if I wouldn't break a hip, man, I'm ready to go out in the football field right now and run a very slow 40 time.
Hey, we might be getting some martial arts training in one of these days. I'm telling you.
Maybe that's the collaboration we need to do. Marty, how can we follow you? How can people learn more about what you're doing and follow your progress and support you in all that you're trying to do in the sport?
Yeah, I think I'm available on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at MJ Bose, MJBOWES. I check my DMs. So if you've got questions, anything we went over today, or you want to help me and support some of the things that I'm working to support, shoot me a direct message on any of those platforms, and I'd be happy to have a conversation with anyone. I'm happy to talk.
Well, folks, you heard it here. I am co-signing this gentleman. If you have kids that are involved in sports, it doesn't even have to be lacrosse. If you just want to teach them the other level of preparation, you want to make your young men and young women, you want to put them on the path to be great adults, this is a guy you got to have in your life, Marty Bose. And I got a surprise for you, Marty. Come on over.
There we go. What
Yeah.
up, DJ? Good
So
to see you, man. Nice hoodie.
it was important to him that was that
Nice hoodie.
nice hoodie.
Thanks.
So it was important for him to come over and say hello to you. That's the kind of respect he has for you. He's never once come in and interrupted a show in 25 shows. He interrupts the one that you're on, and that's the kind of difference you're making in this young man's life. So hats off to you, Marty. Thank you so much for joining us. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been a very, hopefully a very educational episode of Difficult Conversations. Please like it. Please share it. Please follow us on all our social media platforms. And this is, like I said, we're just getting started here with these great conversations. Marty, thank you so much. Everybody, again, thanks for taking time away from your family. And as always, #supply the why. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.